Zeal Education Society, redefining excellence.
Hello and welcome all. I am Mr. J. Sarnavkar, Assistant Professor in the Department of Civil Engineering of Zeal College of Engineering and Research, Pune. In my earlier video, I have discussed the building bylaws, its necessity, how they are being implemented and important pillars of implementing these building bylaws. In today's session, we will discuss in detail which are those building bylaws need to be or essentially followed by municipal authorities as well as all those governing bodies. Last video, we had discussed those three components, that is safety, ventilation and systematic growth, which are the outcome of following these building bylaws strictly. Now, after following these building bylaws, you have to make sure that there is a provision of all those units or all those building components which are having all those dimensions as per norms. And these norms are to be followed, are to be cross-checked by competent authority. Now, regarding rooms and apartments, there must be a proper ventilation. And this ventilation can be possible by providing the room dimension with appropriate sizes. At the same time, means while considering the width and length of the room, we must think about the height of the room also. The roominess is the principle whenever designing the building component, which follows how the occupant, how the user will feel while living or while using that particular room. And so the size with reference to not only width and length, height also we must think about while designing the room dimensions. The other parameter is weather condition. Why this weather condition must be considered while designing the structure? Because your structure must be sustainable, must be adaptable to the present climatic condition. For example, in case of heavily monsoon area, you must recommend a pitch roof. At the same time, you have to make provision for damp resisting parameter. So such component you must think about. In case of the extreme hot or arid areas, you have to think about how the structure will remain cool and calm. How you are going to, which material you are going to suggest. For example, in case of heavy rainfall area, you should not recommend brick masonry. Rather, you may recommend the stone masonry. The external plastering thickness must be thick enough. These kind of practices must be considered, and so weather conditions should be taken into consideration while designing the building. Then availability of land and population. These are the interrelating terms, as we always show the availability of space it is an indication in terms of the population density. The population density is nothing but the number of people per square kilometer. Now, depending upon the population density, you can define, or your actually authority can provide you the certain FSI, and accordingly how much land is available with you, that FSI must be followed whenever designing the building. So your availability of land and how much built up area you are going to provide, that can be verified by local authority. Open spaces around a building and their height is the third parameter. Now, in case of open spaces around a building, these are very important because mostly from front side we are leaving the larger spaces than the rest of the three sides. Now, to the back side, the free space is required for the provisions like septic tanks, or nowadays we are providing the underground storage tank for rainwater harvesting too. So these provisions can be made available to the adjoining sites. But the open spaces around the building are essential with reference to safety. In case of any kind of emergency, one can have a very immediate escape by these provision of free spaces around the building. And another component is height. You might have heard about the height restriction in the area or in the vicinity of airports. The same thing is there. regarding the main roads or highway. The height of the building is being, there is always restriction to the height just to get a proper light into the structure. As well as in case of the area where the airport authority or which is adjoining to the airports, there is always height restriction to the building. Now in case of rooms, the height restriction is with reference to the utility of the room. In case of residential building, the norms are different. Rather, for the commercial building or any mercantile building or any industrial shade, the height could be different. So depend on the type of building which you are already studied in the earlier video, that depending upon the type of building, the room height as well as building heights may differ. The next parameter is water supply and sanitary provisions. Now in case of water supply, the project may have, or the owner may have his own water supply, or maybe rely or may be dependent on the municipal water supply. Now in case of the provision, the owner must have, your plot must have sufficient space to occupy either tube well or open well within your premises. Now the second case, when you are depending on the common or public water supply, then there must be a sufficient space so that the input line or the water carrying line can be entered in your premises without any difficulty. The same case with reference to the drainage issue. Now in case of water supply, it is not recommended to store the municipal water, but in case of sanitary provisions, it is expected in most of the corporations. Now in India, in majority of municipal authorities have aligned the rules that each building must have its own treatment facility on their sewage or drainage, and then the treated sewage is allowed to connect with municipal sewers. This has been made mandatorily by many of the municipal authorities in India. And by considering these, the open spaces are essential. In case of drainage line, there will be the chambers. To every junction, there will be the one chamber. So sufficient space also must be there to construct the chamber, so that there will not be any kind of congestion or choking up of sewer or drainage in the drainage line. Next point is structural design or sizes and sections. So definitely with reference to structural safety, earthquake resistivity, these parameters are very important. Structural design means all those structural components like foundation, beams, columns, slabs, all those staircase, parapet walls, your balconies, any cantilever portion, that must be safe enough. And the last point is line of building frontages. These building frontage are important when your property is having a commercial value, as well as the utilization is for commercial purpose. Majority of the commercial buildings which are well connected with main roads, these must be having the provision of the parking. Now in case of dealing with building bylaws, these are the few terminologies that one must be well aware about. The important one is the plinth and plinth area. So we have already discussed what is the plinth. So it is a portion connecting substructure and superstructure. Its provision, why it is essential, what is the significance, we have already discussed. Now in case of plinth area, the plinth area is nothing but which is a totally area covered by, or which is being considered as a built up covered area. So plinth area is nothing but you have to take the external dimensions of plinth, and that will be your plinth area. The room height must be considered as the center to center distance, or in case of flat roof, it is a slab to ceiling, means we term it as a floor to floor distance or floor to floor height. Now in case of pitch roof, the room height is considered as room height shall be the vertical distance measured from the finished floor surface up to the midpoint of sloping roof. Means it is somehow the average height. Means if it is a pitch roof, then you have to take the average height at average length to the finished surface. That will be the room height in case of pitch roof. In case of flat roof, it is very clear that it is a floor to floor height of the room. Then the another important terminology, that is volume plot ratio. Now here the volume of building is need to be measured in the cubic meters, in terms of cubic meters. Means you have to measure length, width as well as height, or simply in case of the room or in case of the buildings with irregular shapes, you have to first of all calculate area and then multiply it by height. Again, for the height, in case of pitch roof, you have to consider the average height, means at average length, and in case of flat roof, you have to take floor to floor height and multiply it by area, so that you can get the volume of your structure, volume of your building, and divide it by or take the ratio with reference to the plot, that is a VPR, that is volume plot ratio. The another and important terminology is FSI. We also term it as a FAR, floor area ratio or floor space index. The FSI is being provided by governing authority that indicates the how much construction you can go ahead, or how much construction you are being allowed for the particular plot. So it is a ratio of the floor or constructed area to the plot area. Now this constructed area is nothing but the total area covered, means area covered by ground floor, first floor and all those floors divided by plot area. Now mostly the FSI is provided in terms of 1, or mostly it is a 1, means the available plot area and the same construction or same built up area you can follow. Now for example, my plot is 1000 square feet and my building is also having the built up area as 1000 square feet. Now considering the side margins, I must prefer that to provide the multiple story. It may be the 600 square feet to the ground floor or 400 square feet to the first floor. So these kind of practices are followed at site. Now FSI or floor area ratio is an important part regarding the sanctioning of your project. It is strictly followed, it is strictly monitored that whether you have followed the FSI as per the area. For example, in case of metropolitan cities, the FSI is more than 1, but in case of many of the rural areas, the FSI permitted is 1. Now FSI can be made available, additional FSI you can get it in terms of the TDR. So that terminology also we are going to learn in the next video.
Zeal Education Society, redefining excellence.